would like to welcome my friend and colleague from University of South Carolina, Aiken, Dr. Darren Timmons. He's a session moderator for Cybersecurity and Privacy, Part 1. He's Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Darren and I have worked closely for the last 5-6 years, including few trips to India and other countries. And Mr. John Dolan, who's Cyber Strategy Director of Savannah River National Laboratory, SRNL, Mr. Mike Opacity, Senior Director, Global Security, ADP, and Mr. Ron Foghan, EVP, Strategic Growth Office, Amentum. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot, Ani. I really appreciate the chance to inject maybe some South Carolina culture into the heavy Georgia-influenced conference today. It is great to be here. I've enjoyed listening to the conversations on a wide variety of topics. Cybersecurity certainly knows no bounds. State lines don't matter. International lines don't matter. Here in Aiken, we sit in the Savannah River, central Savannah River area, the CSRA, and a lot of our culture sits on both sides of that Savannah River in Augusta, Georgia, and in Aiken, South Carolina. With the moving down of the U.S. Army Cyber Command into Fort Gordon, just on the Georgia side, it certainly has had an impact for us in Aiken and across the region. And so cyber has certainly become more important to us at the University of South Carolina, Aiken. We call it USC Aiken. We're a university of about 4,000 students, have primarily undergraduate degrees and some master's programs as well. But we have great community partners, and I have brought several of them with us today. John from Savannah River National Lab, which we have a high number of overlaps with. Amentum is one of our key sponsors and partners here that is both local and global. And then ADP, which you'll hear from folks from different organizations there. ADP has a home in Augusta, also has an organizational footprint in Pune, India. And so I hope our conversation today will be of great interest to everyone listening. So I wanted to just kick off to John, and if you could tell us a little bit about kind of how Savannah River National Lab sits, thinks, plans for cybersecurity. Is this a big deal for you guys?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm coming from my very nice office here in my car. I'm going I've got caught in between two different things. So as the last speaker was saying, the dynamics of the cyber world is you can almost be anywhere and be part of that world. And that kind of leads into the view of where we are at SRNL. About 3 years ago, we began a very focused effort within cybersecurity because, again, we're looking at primarily right now the resiliency of our national infrastructure, both electric grid and factories. All the things that are running things on a larger scale in industrial control systems. Over the years, we've noted and have seen the vulnerabilities that are available to legacy operating technology as it sits on top of these structures. Modernization with IT on top of that. So as you layer these in, more and more vulnerabilities are created over time. Most of these systems have vendors that have long gone out of business, have been bought out by others, and understanding whether or not there are new vulnerabilities that have been inset. So as we look at the problem set across, again, the larger spectrum of energy resilience, which is the mission for DOE, and ensuring that we can defend against, threats, both, from general hackers just having fun, to nation state or non-nation state players that would be willing to harm our nation through attacks on our infrastructure.
Great, thank you, John. Appreciate that. Fog, give us a little intro into Amentum, kind of your business mindset and your approach to cybersecurity.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. So we have a huge challenge with cyber. When you look at a company like Amentum, we sit in the defense industrial base. We support major federal clients like Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security. So we've got a broad array of clients, both in the classified space and the unclassified space. And with approximately 35,000 employees, you can imagine what the challenges are to maintain security across that. We're in more than 30 different countries across the globe. And so how you layer cybersecurity across that really becomes our biggest challenge, so that we make sure we're protecting our clients oftentimes, which is the federal government. And oftentimes we have some of their most secure and most sensitive data. So for us, it's about layering it. And so understanding the fact that, how vulnerabilities arise and looking at the enterprise so that we've really layered our security so that we look at the right layers for the right individuals, for the right accesses across the board. And then furthermore, how we develop, not only do we have to do that internally and working with all our government clients, but then we have literally thousands of vendors, subcontractors, all of which then you have to build and understand potential vulnerabilities that lie within their network. So for us, it's a very complex issue. The threat is constantly evolving. So you no sooner build resiliency in one area and resiliency will appear in another, or vulnerabilities will appear in another. So for us, it's a constantly moving target. What we really focus on is building a framework that really starts with security with everybody, so that we look at our data and how we protect that data. So an ever-evolving challenge that companies like ours are constantly looking at and trying to innovate and find out how do we protect that data, both our data, our clients' data, and our vendors' data.
Thanks a lot, Fogg. It's no surprise that John with the DOE and Fogg with the DoD government contractor sense that it is really critical. Mike Capacity is here with us from private industry. Mike, can you kind of put your company in context for us and how important cybersecurity is for you all?
Sure, thanks. So I'm with ADP, and we pay probably some of the order of 60 million people every pay period. We move on the order of $2 trillion a year. We're the single largest taxpayer in the U.S. to the U.S. government. We have over 600,000 clients, and we are involved in 130 countries with a presence in 40 countries. So basically every issue that was echoed by the DoD and by the DOE are also present in private industry. Without some of the nice Title 10 entitlements that you guys have in terms of going places that I can't go and seeing things that I can't see. So I came from that world originally. I was in the U.S. Cyber Command. I was at Fort Gordon in the CSRA for over 10 years. And coming into private industry, it's interesting to see almost exactly the same problem set, many of the same actors, and in addition to that, you have all of the traditional criminals. So it's been eye-opening. It's been a challenge, but cybersecurity is as always an ever-changing. You will never get bored in this field.
Thanks, Mike. As we were having our pre-session meeting, talking through what are the key issues for all of us, we talked about communication, kind of between sectors, at the same time when we're trying to keep things secure, sharing best practices and working on these problem sets together is really critical. At USC Aiken, as we were putting together our degree in cybersecurity, it's a fairly new degree for us, but we've had a lot of student interest gearing up for I believe our first student will be graduating in May. And we worked closely with folks from SRNL. We shared with ADP our degree plan and got some feedback from you all, trying to find the right way to develop that next set of skilled workforce for you all. So I'm curious, as in the area of communication, how you all think of sharing best practices, operating beyond company lines, outside of different government verticals as well. Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I'll hop in real quick. I was on a panel last week, and this was one of the key topics that we had. Legally, almost all companies in the United States don't have to report if they've had a cyber intrusion. It's usually done out of wanting to ensure that it doesn't happen to others. But for every one that is reported, we have no idea how many go unreported. So it's hard to begin to understand, if I'm looking at trying to ensure the resilience of the grid, how many attacks have taken place on the grid? What were the vectors that they used? What kind of tools did they use? One of the most important things I think within the industry to ensure that you're going to have a higher degree of security is to have crosstalk. And I realize there's always going to be the concern of shareholders, value of the company, public perception. If you've received an attack and you may have been, had to pay ransomware, you may have had to do other things. But by not communicating and having some good conversation, we actually perpetuate the success of a lot of the hacks, because again, if we're not talking about them, we're not being able to address them, we're not collectively looking at solution sets, it's going to continue to grow. And it is a growth industry, and I see no mitigation of the growth of hacks, whether it's going to be for criminal well-being or as the unspoken weapon of the future. If you want to bring the United States to its knees, take away our electrical grid, and see how long the general population puts up with not having it.
Hey, Darren, just a thought, because John brings up I think a critical point. As a private company, at Amentum, that's always a challenge, right? Because you've got investors, and so disclosing certain things becomes problematic. So how then do you share vulnerabilities, best practices across the board? It was funny in our pre-session, John, you were talking about the Jack Voltaic series, and something clicked over, because we were a major sponsor and participant in that just a few years ago, actually when we were AECOM, even before we broke in and became Amentum. And I was thinking of that question the other night, and I thought to myself, what are we doing today? Because we learned a lot ourselves, as well as working with state and local and federal officials across the board. So I think one of the answers may be, or a way to share kind of vulnerabilities, best practices, is getting companies, particularly private companies and public companies, but non-government companies, to participate in series like Jack Voltaic, where they have an opportunity to listen, participate, see what's happening, see what the latest attack vectors are looking like, and learning as well different ways. So you just triggered something in my mind, because I thought I need to get back with you and go, how do we bring Amentum back into that? Because I think there's such value, because it offers a way for us to collaborate, right? But without necessarily the stigma of saying, I don't necessarily want to come forward with a vulnerability or an attack that may affect shareholder price or investor status or whatever. But if I'm sitting and I'm participating in the exercise and I understand my enterprise and our risk, I can sit and listen, input those, and take those ideas back. And I think that becomes a really powerful setting to do that. So we just that thought just came to mind, and something I just thought, hey, I'm gonna figure out how I can get back into that and support that. So those are the types of things I'd like to see more of, where we get industry, academia, the government together to look at and say, hey, let's run through these, and it really will help us kind of both prevent, prepare, and respond to what we may see in the future.
Mike, do you see some potential for that? You've come from the government side and now in the private industry side. Are there some hurdles that we can help overcome?
I think there absolutely are. I think the concept of range play is not really understood in the private sector as well as it is in government and military in particular. When you set up on a cyber range and you have either an active aggressor or you're trying to defend a particular type of infrastructure, you then, the gloves are off, because it's not necessary. You're not risking the power grid. You're not risking your business. And range play, I think, goes a long way towards proving to defenders that they do have the ability to do a certain task and make a significant difference, as well as specifically mitigate threats. And some of the things that come out of that at the end of the day, especially if you hotwash with the aggressors, is you learn what they were going for, how they were going for, what could you have seen, what should you be looking for. And that kind of experience is reinforced in real world. It's reinforced in the range, or it's seen on the range, and then when you see it in the real world, you're able to identify it faster, act on it faster and be much more confident that you're seeing something that's bad, rather than, gee, I think that's strange. I wonder if I should tell somebody. So I think there's absolutely places there for us to work.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you all for that. At the university, we think definitely about how do we prepare that next generation workforce. And there's oftentimes sessions at conferences that talk about, well, should it be education or should it be training? Like, what are those two? Which option should you take? More of a technical skill set or a long range bachelor's, master's degree? And I think clearly the answer is both. You need both a foundational and long-term perspective, and you need those technical skills. One of the cool things we have just established at USC Aiken now is to incorporate SANS cyber certifications within our degree plans. So there's a set of 4 certs that students can choose to get in place of 4 of the courses in our degree plan. That way they come out with a bit of a proven skill set related to those SANS certifications, as well as the bachelor's degree. I'm curious if you all see other ways that educational institutions can help sort of fill that workforce need, or how you can partner with academic institutions as well.
I'll jump in first on the commercial side. I'll tell you, I just left the board meeting about 3 minutes ago before this meeting, and one of the number one discussions we had really was on retaining and acquiring talent. The workforce right now is I'll tell you, in my size, my single biggest limitation. At any given day, I probably have 50 cybersecurity vacancies that I'm trying to fill every single day. And so competing, and it's a highly competitive market. So I'm competing with government side. I'm competing with my fellow commercial companies and the larger tech industry, right? And so there's really it's a challenge. I don't know if anybody, I'd be interested to hear what John and Mike have to think, but I can tell you I can never get enough. I just don't have enough qualified and experienced and certified. So to your point, Darren, you need really all 3, right? So I need somebody that's got the basic educational understanding and academic background. I need certain certifications, right? Because that's important for my clients, particularly when I'm working with my federal clients, whether DOE or DOD. And then I need experience, right? So I need to look at that across that. I think for us, getting in early, we talked about earlier, I think really getting interns, getting people much earlier, getting them energized about that. And then I think from a commercial side, whether sponsoring different certs is something certainly we would be very interested in, something we can partner with, so that when you get a student, ideally you have time to process the clearance, get them certified, and give them some experience while they're going through the academic environment. So I think that becomes a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I have to agree wholeheartedly with all the different parts that Fogg was talking about, because we have that same exact issue, but we have one additional one, and I know Fogg has it too, is having clearable cybersecurity experts. When you're looking at undergrad, grad, and then to the PhD realm, that family of available folks that you can actually bring in get smaller and smaller, and the competition for that talent increases exponentially. What we've done with USC Aiken and some of our other university partners is get in early. I'd be able to identify students, get them involved in things such as internships, get along when they're working on their capstone projects, bringing them over, trying to get some other excitement generated, which is hugely important. We cannot compete as a DOE entity at the lab with a lot of the commercial entities. I mean, we're just not going to be able to pay the prices we do. So we have to have them excited about that research that we do, excited about the problem sets that we go to. And the only way we're really going to be able to do that well, in my opinion, is getting into with our partners at the universities very early on, bringing the students over having mentors alongside with them as long as we possibly can, identify those that are what we see as the great opportunities for us, and cultivate that student to be able to be a possible future asset. For us, going out just in the world and putting out advertisements, I get everything from soup to nuts. I've got people that have no relationship to cyber putting in, and then I get some very good folks. And our turn rate on hiring it takes a little while. And I've lost more candidates than I've brought in, because by the time we got an offer out, they're already gone because they've got a lot of offers. So it's proactive engagement from the very early parts. And I would even say going as much as down to the K-12 level, and getting students excited in the K-12, and then follow them as best you can.
Yeah, John, I agree with that. I think STEM's so important early. We invest in it in Aiken and across the board heavily, because it's the only way we can grow the workforce. And we have the same requirement, right? Typically, all of our positions require, a TS clearance. And so now you add another layer of complexity on that. Right now, you got to get somebody that's willing to go do a full scope poly, right? And do all that. So, and I've got to pay them something that's equivalent, on contract, that I don't have the budget of Google or Amazon or you name it, right? Apple, that, and you can't wear your flip flops and your bring your dog into the office. So the last thing I'll throw in that, in fact, we were just discussing this in our board meeting, is we have the additional challenge that COVID has presented. And one of the things that COVID has shown is people like to work from home. A good portion of the workforce has been working from home, and our workforce, for the most part, still has to go into the office. And so what we're finding is they're looking for jobs and going, well, wait a minute, I've got a skill, willing to forego clearances to go take a job somewhere else that allows them to work remote, or allows them to go, look, I don't want to commute into the city anymore. And now I can go, and go buy my dream house and, in the mountains of Tennessee or whatever, and still do my job. So all those things add layers of complexity and challenges for us, why at any given day we've got vacancies in that space.
Thanks, Fogg. Mike, how many flip-flops you wearing around the house?
No flip-flops, no dogs. Unfortunately, I tell people, and it's honestly true, that I left NSA on Friday. I went into ADP on Monday, and I still felt like I was going into a skiff. So there you go. It really is all the same. But I wanted to chime on just a couple of things. Internships and bringing up people when they're in an undergrad position is a fantastic way to get talent. The other thing, Cyber Patriot is active in a lot of the secondary schools, high schools in the area. Encouraging those programs, local security conferences, anything you can do to kind of get either college students or locals interested in cybersecurity, because they generally really are. They take to it like a fish to water, and it's a matter of then feeding it, bringing it up, nurturing it, and then being able to bring them in at a level that they can go to. And I think your certification program does a lot towards that with SANS. It prepares them for day one so they can begin to learn their real job, which is really the best you can do.
Yeah, that's great.
And if I can give kudos to USC Aiken, I think your model that you have, not looking down on any other programs, but by having, the book smart SANS certifications, which are recognized by industry as your truly a technical benchmark, and then doing the internships. When you're turning a student out now to industry, they've got the Triple Crown working on for them. I can look at them saying, I can look at your resume. I can see you've done the work. I can see you've got the certifications, and I know you went to a good school and you've got that solid, regular academic base. So I think that is just so important. I think you guys did an amazing job.
That's great. I appreciate that, John. It's certainly, we're new to the space in relative terms, but have great partners in the area, of course. We're getting some questions in the chat, and I would love to know, as time goes on, if those companies out there, if you have other ways that you found to be successful in partnering with universities or partnering and sort of bringing up that next generation workforce, whether it's Cyber Patriots and K through 12, internships, I guess, are probably the standard models there, and then certainly providing funding for recent graduates or almost graduates to get some certifications as they go, or three of the ideas that we have talked about here today. Ani, did you want to inject a question or read one from our Q&A?
Right. So I would inject a question which is to you as well as to panel. In general, we are seeing that students who are enrolling in STEM programs, and I am making an extension here that students who join cybersecurity classes, they need to be pretty tech savvy, coming from heavy background in engineering or math or skills of cybersecurity. On one hand, we read that the STEM graduation or graduates are decreasing, and in other certain parts of the world, that number is increasing. So my question is that how do we compete as a society in 10 years from now, when your needs are going to be as it is? All the speakers, John, Fogg, and Mike have said that, they are having challenges in finding qualified and certified talent. On top of it, the speed with which this technology is going to come with, next generation of technologies which are coming, how do we face that?
I'll chime in real quick. I mean, it's a major worry for me when I look 10 years down the road, and we actually had this conversation at SRNL about 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. When I'm looking at growing economies, whether it's going to be India's economy, Brazil, China, any other country that's now beginning to grow, the demand for those students is obviously going to increase exponentially. With a number of non-U.S. citizens in our schools, that's even if you're not in a classified environment, your opportunities in other industrialized countries is going to have just as much appeal for many of them. And I don't know how quite honestly, we sat through and looked, and we're not really sure how do we try to capture and keep them here. Cost of living is more here, and so possibly very well than in another country. The wages they get may actually provide them a much better standard of living. It's going to be a very hard thing for us to compete with, and that's just my personal opinion. After we went through our SWOT analysis on just looking at personnel and looking at the global economy.
Yeah, I'd basically be in violent agreement with John. I think, you are competing across an international market. The challenge that we have to look at is how do we make it both ways, right? So the population of U.S. students that are engaging in STEM is going in the wrong direction, right? That are getting involved in science and engineering and all the things we're going to need to be competitive in the cyber security market. So that's concerning to me. That trend itself is concerning to me. And then we have the challenge of how do you get non-U.S. citizens where you maybe have a larger pool, in particularly places like India that have the academic background, have the technical background, but then how can you pull those in and say, how do I tap into that market, right? And in a way that it will be acceptable, in the U.S. So on pure commercialized, that is okay, and you see a lot of companies that are have major efforts. I mean, I can tell you, if you separated out the federal work that we do and the classification, you would look at those countries as a prime recruiting pool for you to bring that talent and to drive that. I think I look at it from a larger aspect of some of the challenges that we face across the defense industrial base, and certainly the challenge that John faces in looking at, how do we protect our infrastructure and particularly our grid, where clearances and all those become a factor. And so, that may require some different thinking and some innovative thinking of saying, is there a way that we can do something different, that we can get people into a talent pool, that we can do things with non-U.S. citizens. So, I mean, clearances today, we really haven't changed much, and the process hasn't changed much, right? I mean, not only do we have the challenge, just the timeline of getting people, through the clearance process in itself is cumbersome. So that may require, I think ultimately we're going to probably be forced to look at some different ways of doing that, of looking at ways that we can clear people that maybe one time we would not have been clearable, whether a non-US citizen or other things that we're looking at now and saying we're going to need that talent pool, because really it's become a global market where technology is going, everything is censored, right? Everything is connected. And so cyber becomes really the fabric of everything that we're doing. I mean, try and think of anything that's not connected these days. I mean, I can turn, and I can sit at my desk and turn my pull filter on, turn my lights on, I can turn anything, I can make garage doors go up and down. I mean, I can do almost anything in my home, my car, or whatever, regardless of where I'm at, pretty much anywhere in the world. So that is driving that demand. And there's I see no end in sight. I don't see us ever going backwards and saying we're going to be less connected, right? We're only getting more connected.
Ani, I remember my major research professor 20 years ago lamenting the fact that students were leaving STEM and going into business, for example, I think was what he typically pointed to. So I think it's definitely not a new concern. I don't know if it's been cyclical in that sense, but I was excited here at USC Aiken. 40% of our incoming class this past year selected STEM field as their starting point anyway. And then of course you and I have had some good success developing partnerships with Indian universities,
Right.
to bring students to USC Aiken to pursue computer science degrees. And then Mike, when last time I was at ADP, just pre-pandemic, we brought a whole collection of students that were visiting from a university in India. And we brought them over, and I know that ADP has, as I said, a footprint in India, and we had a great time exploring kind of how the company manages the workforce from 2 different countries, 40 countries, from your opening comments, but in those 2 particularly. Can you talk to a little bit of that about how you manage the workforce from the 2 different sectors?
Sure, I can absolutely try. Now we have a large presence in Pune, also in Hyderabad. So there are lots of ADP associates that work in India. One of them works for me, and getting past the time difference, because they basically run about 12 hours off US Eastern time. It's always fun to have them in meetings when it's like 7 or 8 o'clock at night his time, and we're just getting to work. So there are time issues. There are some cultural issues that we run into from here to there, but the workforce in India is always very, very intelligent. They are very dedicated to task, and they accomplish amazing stuff. We do a lot of development down there. We do a lot of security work down there. We used to have a critical incident response center in Hyderabad. We since relocated it, but it was there for the longest time. So I guess it's just part of being in a more of a global connected type of economy where you work where the talent is. There were times when I was working in Bucharest or working with people in Bucharest and Romania and the EU. So you have to go where the talent is. You have to deal with the conditions on the ground as you run into them.
That's great. I know in our area for sure, since cyber has become such an everyday topic, the students at the middle school and high school levels are constantly hearing that, oh, this is a great field to go into. You should pursue computer science or cybersecurity or things like that. So I know that is helping to drive their interest in that direction. Whether they have the aptitude, capacity to be successful in that field, will take some training and take some time exploration there as well. So I'm hopeful that as we push further into the need here, that the students will see that this is a really viable field and broadly defined, with the STEM fields. We have a couple of questions in the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm actually a history major, so I snuck in under the wire. Just because you're not STEM doesn't mean you can't do the work. It's just sometimes it's a little bit harder.
Right, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it is true. You don't have to necessarily have a certain collection of courses, but the capacity and the competencies in the areas where you are relevant to the job is most important. Generally, you can find that training inside those courses, whether they're high school, university, certs, tech school, whatever. So there's different ways to get that for sure. Couple of questions kind of circling back to some of the things we talked about early in our session from David Prue. We live in a society and with commerce on non-sharing, commerce considered their knowledge proprietary. Is there a knowledge base compared to the NCIC, a National Criminal Information Center, for vetted organizations to share knowledge on criminals and their means? So getting back to that communication, is there a repository somewhere where we know the
There's quite a few, and they all kind of vary in terms of quality of information. So the biggest issue you run into is that if you disclose information publicly, you also disclose it to the actors, so they understand that you know that about them, and they will then change their tactics. So there's organizations such as InfraGard, which is an FBI outreach organization to critical infrastructure. There's the ISACs, the information sharing communities that industry, again, critical infrastructure has built to share information inside their fields. There's places like the National Cyber Forensic Training Alliance that deal with, again, sharing and developing cyber TTPs and shared experiences that are there. The thing is about them that you have to keep the associations private, or within the organizations, the member organizations. You don't want to be don't feed the trolls, actually, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the issues that we deal with too is when you're even looking at these databases, how often do they get updated? So if I'm a bad actor and I want to get into a certain supply chain, I may buy a company, or I'll have a front company buy into a company, and you may not realize that someone has been able to inject themselves into one unless you do a lot of research. And again, it's like the vendor subs, and their supply chain. If you start rolling through all that, it gets more and more difficult. And then the possibility of having someone looking at where the supply chains, where the electronics going, I want to be able to disrupt it by giving faulty parts that die after 2 months of being used, by having a good lifespan of 2 years before you have to start thinking about it. So it is a hard problem. And there is, and as we were saying, that there are databases out there, but they're only as good as the most recent piece of information they've got to update it to.
Yeah, and I guess that supply chain fear it really works against the concept of sharing information and diversifying business contacts. And the more sure you are of your normal source, the less likely you are to reach outside of that based on those kind of concerns. So I appreciate that. We did have a quick question. We need to wrap up here, but a question about where does the plan to protect come from related to our utilities? And you mentioned electrical grid specifically, John, but are there plans in the works? Can we go find that somewhere?
Well, I think, again, when you're looking at the electric, we'll just say the electric grid, 80% of that's privately owned, and it's going to be privately controlled. From a DOE perspective, what we try to do is provide also best practices based upon, NIST findings as well as intelligence, as well as, research and development. Try to share that as much as we can with industry and talk through the cybersecurity aspects. Hopefully that takes hold. But again, it's, if it's more of a cost benefit ratio, that's where the company is going to look. Is that going to affect the bottom line? Do I accept that risk? And so trying to be more risk adverse, vice risk acceptance, I think has to have a critical ring to it when you're having the conversations, when you try to develop plans with other companies. But at the end of the day, you're just there to help, and they're going to build it on their own.
Yeah. Fogg, 30 seconds. Anything to add to that?
I agree with John. It's about trying to set frameworks up. The better your framework, I think, and certainly what we do with both NIST standards and what's been done on the DoD side with CMMC. I'll just give you one very quick example. We did an assessment on an energy company, and they were concerned particularly about their industrial control system. Believe it or not, the vulnerability and our ability to penetrate was actually through the security system. So they had hooked up and put security monitors on, but injected them so they could get video images in through their ICS. And actually through that, we were able to. So sometimes just understanding when you're building components and keeping a framework, in every piece you add, just remember what vulnerability you may potentially be adding.
Right. Well, Ani, thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to have this panel and talk through some of the issues as we see them here in our area. I want to thank John and Fogg and Mike for being key partners to our university and also for providing their expertise for the panel today. Thanks, Ani.
Great. Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate your participation and participation from a different perspective, as you said in the beginning. And I know cybersecurity is becoming a very important area for our region, especially with the Army Command being in Augusta. We hope to continue working with USAICN and our other partners here, other companies, for a bigger format program in the coming months. So thank you, gentlemen.
It all worked. Thanks, Ani. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.